Am I correct in assuming that, for example, like JVC can put out a satellite that's, I mean, that's so small, I don't know what the capacity is.
Who's JVC?
JVC, the Japanese. I saw something on the internet where it looked like the size of the satellite was something you could set on a table almost. Yeah.
There are, yeah.
There's something like that.
Very, very small. What are the capacities of?
Well,
what's the?
It depends on what you want. I mean, the Iridium satellite I compare it to a Volkswagen, right? I mean, that's kind of. So I mean, you can make. I mean, you could make that a satellite, right? I mean, so it's so if you want to do something useful, right? I mean, so it depends on what you want to do. I mean, now if you want to put a camera on to take pictures, then you got to stabilize a platform. If you only want to communicate with it, or I don't know. So if you just want to, so you can build a small one.
And related to that, I have a colleague. He was a congressional liaison. He's an Ethiopian. Became a naturalized citizen. I think his name is Noah Paulus, but he started a company, and at the beginning, I don't know if it was the radio station or the satellite itself. One was called Afrostar, one was called Caribstar, and all they did basically was broadcast radio signals to the Caribbean and over Africa. And it was a way for example, it was a very, very cheap way, because I think they got somebody to subsidize the radios and everything for farmers and that sort of thing. So
yeah.
So I mean, like, what is those would be, you know, if this is the Volkswagen, then those have to be like the nanos of the industry.
Right.
We're actually all writing a paper on CubeSats, and CubeSats are usually like 10 by 10.
Centimeters. Wow. 10 by 10.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at the technology on Iridium, I mean, right? I mean, I put all the RAM that's associated with our processors was done in Kuala Lumpur. I mean, today, I mean, if I brought down a whole bunch of stuff on my memory stick, right? I mean, if I glue a memory stick on there, that'd overwhelm the storage capacity we have with all our RAM, right? I mean, today's technology is the key thing that's missing in the government systems today is their weakness in commercializing, in qualifying commercial technology for space. The weakness that the U.S. has is their inability, not inability, but their weak ability to commercialize stuff for space. And only Motorola could. I mean, it's hard for the government and it's hard for these big satellite companies to commercialize things for space, and because they don't understand the fundamentals of quality. So anyway.
Is that why? I'm sorry. Is that why we've seen? Could we ever arrive at a point through economy of scale where we have commercialized, or we've leveraged the technology to the point where it becomes more efficient from a cost perspective than it is today, where we could actually compete with other existing communication devices? Because it sounds like what you're saying is that's one of the reasons why we don't have such efficiency, because there's a bottleneck somewhere in terms of understanding the commercial application.
Right. I think, let's see, I think it's very difficult for us today because of, I would call it organizational hang-ups. Let's go back to my analogy with the Air Force. See, I was on active duty for 20 years. I'm retired Air Force. The Air Force was really good to me, but the Air Force's downfall is it's run by pilots, and you can't, and I really blame the Department of Defense and not the Air Force, right? I mean, you can't expect an organization whose success has been flying airplanes to go over and buy unmanned aircraft. I mean, you can't, I mean, shame on us. I mean, kind of shame on all of it. I mean, shame on DOD. I mean, you shouldn't, I mean, we know better. I mean, you can't, I mean, so the same thing in space. All of our space companies, if you look at our space satellite companies today, and if you look at the processes that we have, the government processes to garner all this, it's all cost plus, and it's all based, and so that's why only Motorola, which was not in the satellite business, now they had an advantage with me because you name and sin in the satellite business, and I'd already confessed it, right? So I'd run out of gas in orbit. I put much larger than nominal fuel tanks on my satellites. I put extra strings of solar arrays. I put a much larger than nominal battery. And all of those things are used to garner. Now I realize that, you know, there's nothing more precious than fuel and power on a satellite. So anyway, so I think it's very difficult for us, and I think we have to, anyway, stop talking.
Well, if I could actually just build on that, we studied methodologies of innovation and corporate structures that support innovation, and it's all, Clayton Christensen would say, an organization cannot disrupt itself.
That's right.
And what you're talking about is what he would call disruptive innovations in business
That's right.
process.
That's right. Yeah, I agree totally. I mean, it was like my second tour, let's see, my tour building unmanned aircraft in the Air Force was 72 to 76. We kind of all go by lessons learned, right? And so I was killing tanks with unmanned aircraft in 72 to 76, way back then. But here I am trying to make the Air Force a career, and I'm killing pilots, right? Now, I mean, I'm trying to get promoted. And here I am doing away with pilots, and all the pilots are going to gather around the table and look at my records, and they're going to say, promote, non-promote, promote. So am I going to stay in the, I mean, I've decided to stay in the military, so I'm not. But that's, and I don't blame the Air Force as much as I blame the Department of Defense, right? They should have long ago taken unmanned aircraft away from the Air Force, focus the Air Force just on the manned platforms. Today, the problem we have with military and space is we've given that mission to the Air Force. Well, you got pilots. Guess what? So you should take it away from the Air Force. So just like but that's hard to do. So.
I wanted to bring back to Forrest's question really quick about the smaller satellites. We all ran a paper on the CubeSats. And I was at the Space Frontier Foundation's conference last summer, New Space 2009. And the guy from Pumpkin, who's like the #1 manufacturer of, you know, kind of like production CubeSats, you know, someone asked the same question you asked, was like, well, what can you do with that small CubeSat? And he held up his iPhone and I said, if I can fit like 10 of these in there, a lot, you know, because you think about how much an iPhone could do, you know, and you can fit more than 10, you know, in a small CubeSat, so.
I was just thinking about the Tucker car. I don't know if, when
Right.
it came out,
Yeah.
I mean, government just shut that thing down because it would have destroyed, I mean, that was the disruptive, it was a car that would have lasted about 25 years. So, I mean, it had everything you didn't need, so I think that makes perfect sense. I'm just wondering, though, if the Chinese will also have these same problems. Is this an industry thing because government supports the platform, or is it just an American thing?
Well, I'd say it's an American and a European thing. It's less illustrative of, let's see, let's take Russia. Russia has a Strategic Rocket Forces organization. I spent a lot of time with the Russian military. So they have a separate organization that deals with the rockets, whereas in the U.S., the rockets are part of the Air Force, right? Which, I mean, the Air Force, you've given the Air Force manned platforms to fly, and they're supposed to be worried about rockets. So there's a lot of organizational differences that make that more effective in those countries. Now they're bridled by bureaucracy. I mean, like I have my farm, an illustration is farm programs, right? I get all these worthless subsidies. Now the only thing that the subsidies do in the farm business is raise the price of land. They do nothing for me in farming. You know, the government should do away with all the subsidies and fund agricultural R&D. Now that's what we need to do. But, you know.
But it's just much more compartmentalized.
Oh yeah, I mean you got all the states and the senators and that'll never happen. We can't do anything right like that. Okay, more questions? Any?